Welcome to Aunty K's, your favorite radical queer indigenous auntie, bringing you tarot every day. Hello everyone, and welcome to Aunty K's Tarot. So as you can see here, I have Grandma Baby's Black Gold Lenormand. I got this as a gift to myself. I did a soul restoration with Amanda from Feral Tarot, and part of it included gifting myself 3 things. This lovely Lenormand mat was one of the 3 things. And so is this deck, Grandma Baby's Black Gold Lenormand. It has been on my wish list for a long time. It stayed there because when you take into account the exchange rate from the US to Canada and shipping, this Lenormand deck, you know, and a Lenormand deck is 36 cards. This Lenormand deck cost me $101. I am not opposed to saving up for something I want, especially when the increased price I am paying is going to an indie artist, particularly when it is going to an artist of the world majority, which this deck is. This is a black Lenormand deck, and it's based on images of Black American culture. And so as the guidebook states, you know, this deck isn't made for me, and I fully appreciate that point of view. 100% I appreciate that point of view. That's the point of view from which I made the Landback Tarot. And the guidebook to me has that same flavor as I wrote with in the Landback Tarot, except this is a Lenormand guidebook from a Black perspective. But that is to say that this is a perspective of self and people and community that I truly appreciate. Even though it's different from mine, I get where it's coming from. I have my own version of that. So the guidebook, I really like the guidebook. The guidebook gives me a point of view and perspective of, you know, of Black worldview in America, and how to translate, you know, how they're translating their realities via Lenormand. And I super appreciate that. There are name changes in this deck, and that somewhat threw me off. The broom, I'm used to the whip being either the whip or the broom, but in this case the broom is the coffin. And it is that because, you know, with a broom, she talks about doing, you know, that big clean out with the broom and sweeping out all those old energies, which is something I do very purposely when I sweep. So I've been using this deck for about a week. It arrived a week ago. And I am seeing that. Now, frequently, if you follow my channel, you'll know that I take a deck out of the box and like use it that day on the hotlines. I was not able to do that with this deck. The numbers and the Playing Card Association are not written on the cards, which we're going to see. It does have the symbols scattered around, but you'd have to count them. So I have titled my cards. So you are going to see that I've titled my cards. So it came with this prayer card, which, you know, I from my understanding, my Cajun side would also use prayer cards. And I wanted something on my altar to represent them. And even though Cajuns are absolutely not the same, this use of prayer cards is. And so that's what I'm going to do with that, respectfully, I hope. So we have the rider. So this is what I mean by like the symbols. We see the hearts scattered around here, right? But like I would have to count them or just always remember. So I wrote the titles. I did it so as not to write through the descriptions here, even though it's too small for me to see without my glasses. But I appreciate that both the guidebook and the cards list the photograph and its credits. Clover is the same, but we're seeing a depiction of gambling, which, you know, Clover can reference that. Although it's not really my main association with Clover. I use the child for that more. I buy collage decks, and I think their art is beautiful and interesting and fascinating. But there's a disjointedness that I definitely struggle with. And my brain just struggles with the very cool in appearance disjointedness. So this, as the clouds, actually reads really well for me. Others don't necessarily. So I'm currently doing practice reads with this deck to get used to it. And I'm using it for myself. And I keep telling myself I'll do it with use it for 5 cards spread it within a reading. But I haven't so far. I appreciate that kings and queens and jacks aren't necessarily prescribed strictly to male or female. So, you know, they're not within that gender binary. So we have a more masculine appearing person as our queen of clubs is the snake. So I understand their creation of this card as a broom. And so this is working for me as the broom and bringing in coffin reads I need to bring in. Corn as a size works, but the nature of the sort of art always makes it hard for me to be like, oh yeah, that's corn. It takes me a minute. Yeah, this one says it's an electrical storm at night, silhouette of houses, but I can't see the silhouette of houses. The birds are again hard for me to, they're disjointed. It's weird for me. It's just weird for me. And that's me and collage decks in general. The fox doesn't immediately stand out to me in this photograph. You know, it's just things like that. Like the bear, the children stand out way more than the bear for me in this particular photograph. I get the connection between an altar and the stars. But I don't usually or primarily read the stars as ancestors, although it can be. The stork's been renamed. The waters. I'm just seeing the woman as a stork in my mind. Hold that together. The dog is the table. I'm going to read this part from the guidebook so we get a feel for the differences. 18, table, from family of Pompal, Negro tenant farmer, eating breakfast consisting of cornflakes, biscuits, fried bacon, milk, and coffee, Creek County, Oklahoma, by Russell Lee. Family, 10 of hearts, element, water. Though we've been conditioned to feel and act alone, we are actually meant to forge meaningful relationships with those who deeply nourish us on a mental, physical, and spiritual level, transcending flesh, blood, and time. Are you surrounding yourself with divine family whose support aligns with your highest good? Have you given them the language to love you? Are they equipped to use it? And are you equipped to do the same for them? Lastly, be mindful of when you are being loyal to someone who was really meant to be a lesson. So the guidebook makes it make total sense. I feel like the changes are similar to changes I made in the Land Back Tarot, where I wanted to redefine something within my own cultural perspective. I get it. And the description is like, yeah, that description of the table as family is very much the dog. I 100% get it. But I have to learn to use this deck slowly for myself before I can jump in and use it. And perhaps, since this is a gift for myself, that is what I am meant to do with it. And so while I've passed on my other collage decks, this is one I'm going to keep and keep working with individually and on a small scale to get to really know it. The tower showing a tree when the tree is a tree is confusing for me in a reading. It really is. I want to look at this first as the size, knowing that the size is corn and then it's a garden. This totally makes sense. There's a lot of people in this deck, which I like, but not all the court cards or people cards are the cards with people in them. And I have made note that this, like, it does add, I find when I am reading, I enjoy a depiction of a person on people-based cards and perhaps not on non-people-based cards, which is something I'll think about. Should I make one? This mice card is disturbing. It's just disturbing. It is. Testimony as the letter, I don't know. I struggle with it. You don't want to put a book in there because, yeah, it is definitely a form of communication and passing on messages. I get the cultural context. And there's lots of different and versatile ways I can actually use this card of testimony, which is fascinating to me. All right, the people cards. The people cards. So, the people cards for this deck, that would typically be the client and their person of interest. These are your options. Mirror card, very cool. I'm completely using it for myself or the client or, the seeker, the person asking the questions. The Ancestors card is cool. Sometimes I use an extra card in a deck, and then wherever it gets placed, I just place the next card on top of it so it still fits in the 36 positions of the grand tableau. And so, for something that's like faded or something, this card then becomes really useful, and I'm using this as the person of interest or the subject matter at hand in the reading. So that is how I am using the 3 people card options. That's how I'm using them. So here again, we have an ignoring of gendered norms, and I appreciate that with this young feminine appearing person in the King of Swords. I really wish the moon card had a moon in it. You know, in some way, it, but his face ends up doing it for me. I've come to recognize this as a moon through his face. Although if I was reading it for client readings, like, I wonder if that would be more confusing. Doesn't matter. I don't explain the cards to them when I read them. I just tell them what's going on and show it to them if it happens to be video. I get this as a key. Of course, I get this as a key. But my head doesn't automatically remember. Like, I know to look for his face in the moon card. The key, I always forget until I, find it. This throws me off with the little halo behind the baby's head when it's also in the sun card. It just does. And again, we have the ignorance of gender norms as we have a grandma here in the King of Diamonds. I get the image as an anchor, and I completely get what she is saying about how we get used to the stability of our oppressions. But it's also supposed to be like a hope card. But, in one of my other decks, the hope card is like a bucket filled with cement that's like anchoring, that's being used as an anchor, like an anchor for a dock at a lake. And I often see it as like something sinking, something weighted. So, considering how often that transposes for me in that way, I do see this as this, and it is very helpful. But I wonder, like, what if I need a card that does show me, like, here's the hope. It's the hope card, right? But I mean, the sun can do it. I don't know. I have to go with the flow. And the cross is the cross. But again, the nature of, like, the images, the cross is like the hardest part to see on this card. So, it is not the easiest to read Lenormand deck, but it is a gorgeous and well thought out Lenormand deck, storytelling, a conveying of an understanding of people's life and hope and love through struggle and oppression, and always standing up through it. These are all things I really get and appreciate, and this makes it fit for personal readings for myself. And I do want to be able to use it on the hotlines. I do have a number of world majority clients, and so I would like to be able to use this, but I need to put in the work and get to know it better, and that's not always my favorite thing. I love a deck that I can just pull out of the box and use. So this is a gift that I am just going to have to work on, and sometimes that's the point, right? That seems to make sense for me. So I'm going to say it's a really well done deck, and I am going to say that it requires reading from a different perspective, and that is worth it. But my aesthetic issues are, I wish, like, the objects, like the cross was the part that stood out instead of the man. I wish choices like that were made. And since this isn't useful to, since there's no pattern to the pips, they don't tell us instantly what that card is. And so that makes it difficult without a label. And I wish I had gone one way or the other. While there are words on this deck, titles, like, they're not always easy to see. Cross is here and it is super hard to see. When it's all white, it's sometimes easy. It depends. It's not the easiest to see. So that does make that a challenge. And that is my review of this particular deck. So rather than sitting right in my my deck container where I hold and house the decks I am currently using, is usually just sitting to the side in case I decide to pull it or use it during some of my reads. Let's wrap this up with just talking about what is on my table right now. This has been in a drawer, easy to access, and it is currently sitting open at the top of my work table with dice in it ready to use. The Roast Iconic Oracle has also been used as I predicted I would use it, where I'm shuffling and pulling a card for each of the people wherever they appear in the reading. I'll just place that over top of them and it will tell me something about them. I still have my Rana George and my Rustic Roots being in use pretty much non-stop. And I'm getting a couple Lenormands for my birthday. The Clarity Tarot is the RWS deck I have in use at this moment. And the Diverse Marseille is the Marseille deck I have on my table in the moment, as well as the Sign of the Times, which, if needed for a little extra advice, I just shuffle it up and have a card and a shadow about the situation at hand. And so those are the decks on my table. And I'm, this lovely little deck. It's not in my work box, but it keeps being sat there with me saying, yes, I'm going to pull it for just a couple cards. And why have I just used it personally so far? So this is not in my official deck holder of work decks I'm using this week, but I keep bringing it out and sitting it beside me, ready to use it for a 3 or 5 card reading. But I've just so far kept using it for myself. And I will keep doing that for now until I get to know this deck. And we'll see what happens. Like, maybe this is only meant to be a personal deck, even though that's not specifically what I wanted it for. But, also, maybe I will end up using it in the everyday eventually, and that would be lovely also. And why not, let's just see what the cards think, if this will become part of my work practice. I would say that this is going to become part of my work practice. that there is wise and sage like advice here, spiritual advice that has got me covered in this and in readings of the heart. And that I am going to be able to bring it all together. That it is not going to be a gamble. It will be a assured bet, and spirit will speak through my mouth if I use this deck. So maybe I just need to step out of my fear and use this today. So let's do it. Let us do that. Let me just stick it right in here and say, that's it. We're using it. No more fear. Actually, let's make this a little bit of a mini lesson, because here's the cold, hard truth. When we're afraid to use a deck like this that is outside of our culture and is asking us to see and recognize things from their worldview and their lived experiences, especially the difficult lived experiences, that fear is tied to white supremacy. So when I am jumping out of the fear of using this deck, I'm acknowledging anti-blackness within me, even though I'm somebody who is a member of the global majority, and even though I'm somebody who works really hard on anti-racism, I still have and always will have bits of anti-blackness to undo within me. And that's really where this fear comes from. And it's important to acknowledge it and recognize when it is impacting our behaviors and decision making, and then to jump out of it in acknowledgement. And I want folks to consider this. Are there decks that you're like, oh, it's not my favorite. Oh, I don't know how to connect with this deck. Oh, I'm afraid to use this deck. And is that because of your own racisms within you? All right. I'll just put that there for now, because I've read through it once. I've been using it in my personal readings to understand the perspective and voice of this deck. That's all, folks. See you later.